But what impact does Forever 21's closing have on cities? The status of malls is in dire condition, and the loss of Forever 21 further demonstrates that. Forever 21 was a staple, and to think about them being a retailer that's closing after we've already seen Macy's and Nordstrom's and Neiman Marcus. Yes, we've talked about the competition from online retailers in fast fashion, but what is it doing to our built environment, to our neighborhoods, when stores are closing at a fast clip? The 4 Degrees to the Streets podcast explores neighborhood design and urban policy topics through the critical lens of equity to give listeners the tools needed to overcome structural and institutional barriers, and examines how the built environment shapes communities for better or worse. Tune in once a month to keep it 4 Degrees to the Streets. Hey y'all, it's Jasmine. Welcome back to the 4 Degrees to the Streets podcast. How y'all doing out there? Let me know some. This is a special Q1 urban planning episode. I will have these at the end of every quarter just to run down really quickly the things that's happened in the last quarter in my life, in the podcast life, and in urban planning. And so it'll be a short episode. We'll still have our monthly episodes with our guests following these as well. But there's a lot happening every single week, it feels like, and I'm trying to keep track of it all, and I know you guys are all trying to keep track of it. And so I was like, let me just put something together, quick little roundup about what I've seen and what kind of the headlines that hit me the most in this first 3 months of 2025. Long year already for me, so let's get into it. So firstly, welcome to office, Donald Trump. He is now the 45th and 47th president of the United States of America. He has been very active, pressing every button he can, using all the tools in his toolbox. Thinking about the changes from the new administration, three come to mind. The firing of federal agents and government employees is concerning just because of the national impact on employment, especially in very concentrated regions like Sacramento and DC, and parts of Atlanta. But then you have to think about what departments they're representing, right? So you have HUD, EPA, USAID. These are entities that, if you care about community development, about equity, about social justice, about environmental quality, losing employees in these departments is detrimental. Another thing is the selling off, as the real estate world has called it, of federal properties. Doge wants to eliminate the federal government's footprint in real estate. And a lot of those properties were cultural institutions, right? And so losing a lot of our cultural institutions that have been protected by the federal government for decades is extremely concerning to me, at least. And then finally, you have the rolling back of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I know that DEI, as we've seen it today in 2025, has been expanded a lot, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic and the civil and racial unrest that we had in the country in the summer of 2020. But many of the forms of those programs and the spirit of those DEI programs existed in different capacities long before 2020 in this expanded form. I myself am a beneficiary of many programs, both in undergrad, in high school, and in grad school, that were targeted for Black people specifically, for minorities, for women, for people who were first generation college students. And so I'm thinking about how the elimination of many of these programs that I'm a beneficiary of will, or at least the lowered funding capacity of them, if they're not fully eliminated, can help serve people who come from non-wealthy or non-resource backgrounds. How do we advance in those neighborhoods, education, employment, opportunity wise, just overall? And so I've been kind of thinking back and forth about where communities can fill in the gap of how the federal government is lacking. So just some thoughts from me on that. Then the fires happened in Los Angeles. I landed back in LA on New Year's Day, and on January 8th, not too long thereafter, fires broke out in what felt like all over the Los Angeles metropolitan area. I'll share my LA evacuation story, because I did have to evacuate my home, and we'll get into it. But first, I'll just talk about the damage. 29 people died. Any loss of life, let me be clear, is significant, right? Almost 30 people are dead across our city. That is terribly sad, and I would like to just offer grievances to their families. At the same time, I'm very grateful that there weren't more losses of life. $20 billion of losses to homes, businesses, commercial stores, schools, housing, all these different physical assets have burned. Something about 60,000 acres of land across the different fires that we had in the city, an estimated $50 billion in economic losses, right? So you have shopping malls closed, you have shopping centers burned down, you have people away from their homes living in different areas. So all of that economic activity, all that spending has disappeared also across those 60,000 acres. I'm thinking about the day that the fires first happened, that day of the 8th, and I'm thinking that my house is probably safe because I live the furthest south. I'm not in the foothills of the mountains. And so my cousin and my best friend, who both live in the Hollywood Hills, came to my house thinking we were going to be safe, right? I'm further south than them. And it's nighttime now. So the fires have been burning all day. And it's probably like 7 or 8 o'clock at night. We're in my apartment and we start smelling smoke. We start hearing fire trucks speed down our streets. That's my impression of a fire truck. And so they're going down the street and we're like, oh shoot. We go up, look on the roof, and we can literally see what felt like a ring of flames. It felt like half of the city was on fire. And so we made the decision to drive south. And now you couldn't really go anywhere else, right? LA's already on the coast, so you can't go west. Plus, there was a fire in Pacific Palisades. Then there's a fire in the valley. And then there's a fire in Altadena, or the Eaton fire. And so to the north, east, and west, there's literally a ring of fire. So you have to drive south. And so there was tons of traffic trying to get south out of LA County and into Orange County. So we drove to Anaheim, and it was just weird. We were leaving LA, which was in so much turmoil. And then you get to Disneyland, and it's far enough away where like you're not seeing smoke, you're not smelling fire, and you're safe. Like you're 2 hours from LA, so you're not really in the threat of a wildfire spreading to you. But you're also at Disneyland, which is quote unquote the happiest place on earth. And so the dichotomy of the two, of literally driving away in panic and in fear, and then arriving in the resorts area of Disneyland and everyone is happy and Mickey Mouse ears, and it's kind of just like, wow, we really have it didn't feel like there was a whole lot of compassion in Orange County for what people were going through in LA. And that just speaks to an overall theme I saw in dealing with the fires. But then everyone in the city, not to say people didn't commit, there were huge donations and charities and all of those things. So LA has been great in supporting each other, but it was a dichotomy driving to Anaheim, to Orange County, and just seeing like it wasn't a thing there, which I'm sure it wasn't a thing in Phoenix either, right? So same thing. But Disneyland, let's talk about Disneyland for a second while I was there. It is one of the most weirdest places in the world because it's so urban and so dense inside the park. And other urbanists have talked about the Disneylandification of America and how Americans live daily in sprawling, suburban, unwalkable, undense neighborhoods. But then we love going to Europe. We love going to Disneyland. We love these main street corridors, but we've outlawed them in all of our zoning. And so being at Disneyland, we had to walk there, right? So we parked our cars at the hotel. We're walking from the resorts district, and my cousin's like, "You cannot walk to Disneyland. Like you have to drive a car into Disneyland." And I'm like, "There has to be a pedestrian entrance, like all these hotels. Why would I pay parking at my hotel and then pay parking at Disneyland?" But I tell you, Disneyland is off of this road called South Harbor Boulevard. It might as well be called South Harbor Highway. It's a 6-lane road, 3 lanes in each direction, many sidewalks, right? There's probably a 6-foot sidewalk on each side, not enough for the pedestrian traffic. And it's dangerous. The cars are speeding. It's right off of the highway, where you get off the highway and you're on South Harbor Boulevard. And it's like, aren't we supposed to be going to Disneyland? Why is this a 6-lane highway at the pedestrian entrance? It was bananas. Earlier this year, I had the opportunity to attend Yolanda Davis Overstreet's screening of her film Biking While Black, Continuing to Ride Through Decriminalization, Disenfranchisement, and Gentrification. The Los Angeles chapter of the American Planning Association had a screening, and I was able to go there and watch the film, which is about biking and walking in the South Central Los Angeles area. And I've seen films about this now in different states. I've seen it in Georgia, I've seen it in Florida. And so this is a consistent and pervasive issue across the U.S. of Black people's mobility being hindered because of policing, because of neighborhood design, and all these different challenges. The documentary was made possible by a mini grant from the Southern California Association of Governments, which is a regional planning organization for SoCal. Great opportunity. Hope you guys can find the film. I'm going to have the links in the show notes. On the theme of bicycle and pedestrian safety, NACTO, which is the National Association of City Transportation Officials, released the third edition of the Urban Bikeway Design Guide in January. This is the pinnacle guide for designing bicycle infrastructure in the U.S. In the book, which does cost money, you will find sketches of street intersections with descriptions about all of the infrastructure from the height of the light fixtures to the width of the bike lane. And in it, they describe and outline solutions for terms like approach visibility zone, which is the space on the roadway where a driver's movement conflicts with a bicyclist movement. For example, a driver making a left turn over a bicycle lane that's going straight. I think we all have heard this in the news, but we haven't really talked about how it really impacts cities. Forever 21 is closing, y'all. Now, as a millennial, woo, my heart hurts. High school, I lived at Forever 21. You need an outfit for the weekend, Forever 21. And so to see it close down, this is their second time filing for bankruptcy. The first time was in 2019. This time in 2025 is the end. They are selling all of their assets. You might have seen the videos on TikTok of people going in there and buying tables and chairs from Forever 21. Like, they're selling everything. It's a full sell-off. But what impact does Forever 21's closing have on cities? Malls have consistently been generally in decline since the recession. Some malls have thrived, right? You have the Westfield Century City Mall here in LA, which consistently does numbers. By and large, most malls are struggling. Take the American Dream Mall in New Jersey, however $1 million effort, and the mall still does not make full mortgage payments after several years of being open, right? So the status of malls is in dire condition, and the loss of Forever 21 further demonstrates that. Forever 21 was a staple in pretty much every city that has a mall has at least one Forever 21. To think about them being a retailer that's closing after we've already seen Macy's and Nordstrom's and Neiman Marcus close down. Yes, we've talked about the competition from online retailers in fast fashion, but what is it doing to our built environment, to our built form, to our neighborhoods when stores are closing at a fast clip and leaving, one, the vacancies, but the social interaction of going to the store and seeing someone and talking to a salesperson, all these different things. Having a fully online, fully digital world is a little bit tricky. We should be exploring that a little bit further. Now on to real estate deals that caught my eye during Q1 2025. The first is Related and Wynn Resorts coming together to work on the Hudson Yards expansion in Manhattan. Related is a international real estate development group. They have about 60 billion with a big old B in luxury rentals, luxury condos, workforce and affordable housing, and mixed use developments, not unlike Hudson Yards there in New York. They also have a project called The Grand here in Los Angeles. Wynn Resorts is a hotel and resorts company. They have the Wynn and Encore Hotel and Resort and Casino in Vegas and the Encore Hotel in Boston, just in the US, for example. So they're coming together, working on a mixed use project in Manhattan, and they wanted to do a casino, y'all, in Manhattan as part of the Hudson Yards expansion. That project was presented to New York City's Community Board in that district. So that's New York City Manhattan Community Board number 4. And that community board voted no against the proposal. There's other options available to the developers to get the project approved, but community boards serve a very important purpose in New York City and in New York State planning. The community boards are the first line of involvement in your local government. The community boards are advisory councils to city government offices that make land use, zoning, transportation, and budget decisions. So the community board can actively support or actively reject a certain number of proposals, and that carries a lot of weight with the Department of City Planning, with the Zoning Board, with the Housing Community Preservation Board, like that. And so opportunities to get involved. DC, moving a little bit further south. Now, DC has had a lot of information, a lot of things happening, especially with the new administration being there. But in DC, there's a large 110-acre redevelopment site on the Anacostia River in the southeast DC called Poplar Point. In DC, the mayor and the city they have RFPs out for development offers. And so they just approved the RFP to build a 15-acre wellness center. The group that was approved was the Therm Group. I spent some time on their website. It looks super fancy to me, y'all. I mean, they have locations in Dubai, in South Korea, in Ontario, in Canada, in different parts of the UK. Check out their website. I mean, if this thing is coming to DC, wow, it's going to completely transform what that site is today, because it's going to have thermal baths and saunas and pools and water slides and all sorts of stuff. So check that development out. The rest of the site is planned to have a 25-acre mixed use development, which will have some housing, and then a 70-acre park and trail system. I'm just here to let anybody know who lives in Southeast DC or in that Anacostia area, hold on to your property. Property values are about to go crazy in this area. Do not sell. That's my message to y'all. Plugging real quick our episode with Jamae Coleman, Supplier Diversity for Small Businesses. If you want to learn more about an RFP or request for proposals and getting your organization's hand on some of them government contracts, tap into that episode with your girl. And then finally, across the country, let's go coast to coast with it, LA. An office to resi conversion is happening in Los Angeles again. There are a lot of office to resi conversions in LA, and I feel like LA might be one of the early pioneers in it, even before we saw the extreme decline in office occupancy after the COVID-19 pandemic. But Jameson Properties is a large local developer to Los Angeles. They just closed on a $60 million loan to convert a 1970s life insurance company building into 210 units in Koreatown. Now, Koreatown is the area where you're going to see the most office to resi conversions in LA. If you drive down Olympic Boulevard, down Pico, down 3rd Street, most of those high-rise towers or mid-rise towers that you see under construction are not office rehabs, they're residential conversions. Jameson Property alone has converted 1.4 million square feet of office into over 2,100 units of residential housing. And that wraps up Q1 2025 in urban planning. Thank you for listening to the 4 Degrees to the Streets podcast. Share this episode with a friend you think would enjoy the conversation. I'm actively growing our listeners and looking to connect with people who are interested in the issues, challenges, and opportunities of community development. So please share this episode with a friend who loves their neighborhood or who is passionate about seeing improvement in our world. Peace out, y'all.